Hello. It is that time of the month, my favorite time of the month, where I get to talk about all the books I just read in the past 31 days, which would have been April. Oh god. Oh wow, April did not happen. I would say it became audiobook April because, oh my god, I did not feel like reading with my eyes. I literally tried the second week of April and I wanted to gouge my own eyes out. It was a pretty good reading month. I really loved everything that I read. Here are some stats. I don't even know how many books I read, so that it'll truly be a surprise when I'm done with this video, / when I'm editing this. Why am I picking this book? I actually gotta check what the first book I read was. What is... Oh, I know what that is. I could have just turned the page. The first book I listened to this month was A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. This one I read because it kept showing up on my timeline, and I was just like, fine. And then I went to go check. The audiobook was fortunately there, a rarity, and it was full cast, technically, because each of the POVs was narrated by its own narrator, voice actors. So this is an urban fantasy set in Canada, for the most part, / Arizona for some other parts, about these 4 teens that end up coming together by some point in the book because each of them have been trying to figure out this series of murders of these iron blood human fae. The term is slipping my mind because it's been a little bit, but these magic half humans, half fae have been being killed. And they all are trying to figure it out because the council is like, we don't care. We're just gonna blame the humans. This one was really nice. It was very long. That was why I was hesitant to read it. A, because it was very long. So obviously the audiobook was long too. I think it was like 19 hours. It was only 19 hours. Okay. But also, it was an urban fantasy. And urban fantasy isn't really my favorite because it's specifically like... Well, urban fantasy is real world fantasy, I think. I don't know. Like I said, some point in my YouTube channel, all the fantasy terms I have yet to learn, but I prefer to be like fully submerged in a fantasy world when I'm reading fantasy rather than like real world half and half, which is what this book does. Yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. I loved the characters. I'd have to say, I don't even know who my favorite character is. I do know that I really loved Hero as a villain. Oh my god, so complex. And I think there's a point in the book where he can start going too much into like a caricature because he's supposed to be like a madman villain. But I think with the complexities of his feelings towards like wanting this admiration from this other character, but then also just wanting to conduct his experiments, it really works. And so it doesn't feel like mocking. It feels genuine, like a genuine madman character. Is that something I can say? I love the casual diversity. I think all of the main cast of characters are queer in some way. Something else I do want to say is this has the chosen one trope. And I feel like the chosen one was having a little bit too much of the whole I don't want to do this period. The whole second act is this person slowing down the investigation just because they didn't want to be involved, which is fair, and I wouldn't be annoyed by it had it not taken up the entire second act, but I would recommend it. Oh, yes, I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I talked about this in my favorites of the Q1, so I won't go too much into it, but this wasn't in my Q1 reads. I don't know why I talked about it in that video. This is a reimagining of Dracula's Brides, but it's queer, and Constanta, was that her name, I think it was, and she's writing these letters to her husband. She's basically like, yo, I was in love with you, but then you really messed up my life, so that's why I killed you. And it's just all of this leading up to why she ended up killing him. That's not a spoiler again. She says that in like the third letter. One of my new favorite books, probably my favorite book. It's going to become my brand book. It's just so beautiful, and it's so sad. The writing was able to convey the emotions of all of not only Constanta but also Magdalena and the other guy through this really well written toxic relationship, and it was just refreshing to see something like that not romanticized, because I feel like when toxic relationships are written as a kind of side plot, they oftentimes don't get treated the right way. But S.C. Gibson, like, obviously this is the focus of the book, is this toxic relationship. And so we can give time to, like, show how conflicted the brides were, specifically Constanta, in her feelings with Dracula, because she'd have these, like, happy moments, and then it would just all come crashing down when he would be abusive. You need to pick this book up. I know it's been showing up on your timeline. I know it's been showing up, so just read it, okay? It's a masterpiece of a book. And it's only a novella, so it'll take you 2 days, okay? Then I listened to Sleep in a Sea of Stars. This one is so weird to me, and we're gonna get into it. So, this is by Christopher Paolini. He's been brought back into the world. I never read the Aragon series, is it? Because I was never into fantasy. So there's that. So this is my first Christopher Paolini, and this is a space opera about our main character. She is saying goodbye to her crew, and they're arriving at the end of their mission, of course. That's why she's saying goodbye. But they still have to make one last stop. And she ends up going onto this planet, and she gets low-key distracted. She just wants to go check something out, and she goes into this cave, and she finds this piece of alien technology, which is like an actual thing that's important, because this is a first contact story, so obviously they don't have any alien technology. And it sets off this intergalactic war between humans and aliens, and it gets more complex than that later, even in the war. But this book is just her literally feeling so much guilt for that, and then trying to stop it with the Wallfish crew. Okay, so this is a very, very, very long book. It's like near 900 pages, I think. And so the audiobook was 30 hours, and so it took me a week to listen to it. And it didn't really help that this is a little bit of a slow burn. It's not filled from like cover to cover with action, and I wouldn't expect it to be, because even that would be a little bit overwhelming. But there's a distinguishment between each action-filled part, because it seems to be following the same repetitive cycle of like what was happening. So even after a while, the book felt repetitive, although I don't mean that in a bad way, like I think a lot of other people do. It got really slow in some parts, and so it took me a while to listen to it. And I wasn't in the story for like the first 39%, I don't know, 44%, because it was just really, really hard to get into, and I need to connect with characters, and I wasn't connecting with any of the characters, especially our main character, which is kind of important. And then I finished the book. Finally, and I gave it a 4 stars. When I was planning on giving it a 3.75, because I loved the end so much, and I think it used all of my favorite tropes very, very well. By the end of the story, I became very, very invested in the lives of the Wallfish crew, and I was rooting for a main character, and the trope it did well was the found family trope. That is my favorite trope, and I am a sucker for it. Even if it's not done well, I will still love it. So obviously, I was just so in love with the relationship for Kira and the Wallfish. The last 150 pages, my favorite part of the book. They were so exciting, emotional, like you didn't know what was going to happen, and I was so scared, because I had a minor spoiler about how something was going to end up at the end, and I was like, but how are we going to get to that point? Like, what's going to happen that makes that thing happen? And I was just anticipating it, and it was just, I loved it. And so I gave it a 4 stars. And then I couldn't stop thinking about the book. If I'm being honest, I can't stop thinking about a lot of the books that I read this month. So then I listened to The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Trotsky. This is the first book in the trilogy. It's a very popular book. So do I tell you the plot? Yes, I love saying the plot because I love talking about the story. But this is set in the Gilded Age in Paris. And we follow a group of teenagers, of course. They all run a hotel, a very successful hotel, which is fun. It's unique. Saint is the main guy, and he kind of like leads these group of teenagers that work at this hotel, and they all are like thieves, I guess. Not thieves, but more like treasure hunters. And they end up getting recruited by Hypnos to steal an artifact, a magical artifact, from one of the mothers. I really liked it. The reason that kind of has a question mark at the end of it was because listening to it, I kind of had the same problem that I did with To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, where I wasn't really connecting to any of the characters. Something I could appreciate was that we got straight into the story. Like, right off the bat, we're starting off with something exciting, and then like soon after that kind of mini subplot ends, we go right into the main plot of the story. And I really liked the quite literal like heist, being recruited, making the plan, making preparations, and then finally most of the book is them doing the heist. So that was really fun, but it was really hard for me to connect with the characters in this book. And so like at this point, obviously I'm like, is it my fault? Is it just me? Is it just me? Because I know everyone loves these characters, and don't worry, I'm invested now. I am in love with these characters now too. I'm actually about to read The Silver Serpents. My favorite thing about this book was the world. Obviously we're in like Paris during the Gilded Age, so there's a very specific kind of setting. It's like the reality version of steampunk. And so it was just so vivid, and I felt like I was there in Paris. And I'm low-key kind of sad that the second book's not going to be set in the same city. It's going to be set in Russia. But I'm sure it'll be just as beautiful. Oh, and then I read the Texkalon duology. This is also another popular duology. I mean, like, people don't talk about it, like, here and there, or, like, all the time. But it's got a pretty popular fan base. Or large fan base. Maybe. I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point. The Texkalon duology starts with a memory called Empire, which follows Mehit as she is the new ambassador in Texkalon. And Texkalon is just this like very advanced empire. They are the colonizers, so they're very elite in a lot of their thinking, and Mehit's obviously dealing with this, but she's also dealing with the fact that her predecessor was murdered, so she has to avoid assassinations of her own, but also like figure out what happened to him. And on top of that, her like technology thing that basically imprints the soul kind of into a new person, that technology is not working, which is also a big deal because it was meant to help her navigate this new role. So without the previous ambassador in her mind, she's alone with no contact with anybody she's familiar with. This is a very politically based sci-fi space opera. I think it's technically considered a space opera. And in that, on top of the fact that the world building is the most important part of this book, the audiobook was not the best choice. But I had no other choice because I was not about to pick up a book with my eyeballs, like I just told you at the beginning of this book. So I picked up 30% of everything that happened, and the other 70% is gone, or being categorized into that was cute, because I cannot explain to you anything that happened in this book except for something that happened at the beginning, the middle, and the end. I was about to joke how I don't even remember what the end was, but it just came to me. I just had to think about it. So, I really like Rebecca Roanhorse's review because it puts a lot of my thoughts into writing. I'll link Rebecca's review down below if you want something more comprehensive than what I'm giving to you right now. But I did really like it. I give it 4 stars. The most important elements, the political intrigue and the world building, I guess, were my favorite parts too. It's just so expansive, and it really felt like you were in different parts of this whole empire versus like the setting feeling very one note. No, my favorite part was Mahit's gay panics. The entire first act is just her having gay panics, and it is so cute, but it's so funny too. That was fantastic. That was fantastic. And then of course I read A Desolation Called Peace, which takes on the more literal, adventurous kind of first contact. This is a first contact story. And I can tell you the plot of this one because it doesn't really connect to the first one, but we follow the same characters, kind of, Mahit and 3 Seagrass, and this one's multi-perspective, and there's a alien species at the edge of the empire that's kind of destroying everything, and obviously they have to like put this in check. There's a perspective from those 2 characters, there's a new general kind of character, and the 11-year-old boy that we saw once in the original book. And I very much felt like his perspective served as just kind of a way for us to still see into the palace, I suppose is the technical term. For that, I would say his perspective was my least favorite, but that's default. I didn't really mind his perspective. But this one I was actually paying attention to because I knew what I was getting into. I was obsessed with the whole themes of this book being about linguistics and language, because the only and main problem that is between the Tusculans and the alien species is that the aliens obviously don't speak their language, and so they have to figure out how to communicate with them, which is where Mahit and 3 Seagrass come in. They have to learn what their language is and then communicate with them. But linguistics is like one of my favorite topics, so I love when it's incorporated into sci-fi because I feel like it really gets talked about and like focused on. I loved 9 Hibiscus. She was the general character. I really loved her, and I really loved that she already had like an established friendship, relationship, whatever, with another one of the characters, because it leaves room for us to get a novella / book if the author decides that she did want to expand on the series, but it leaves room for us to get their backstory, but then also we don't have to spend so much time on them developing their really close relationship. I feel like for what it was all leading up to, the ending was really anticlimactic. I can't really sit here and tell you how else I would imagine it to have concluded, but it wasn't really, I don't know, not one of my top favorite endings ever. I feel like it was a little rushed. Highly recommend this duology. I just read it with your eyeballs, take notes, annotate it, because it's a lot, and I really want to appreciate all of that, so I might do a reread simply just for that, and because I miss the characters. The next book I read was Malice by Heather Walter, and I did actually read this one. I learned about this one like the week before its release date because everyone was reading the arc, and there's just a point, there's just a point where you just gotta pick it up, and I was really into a fairy tale narrative kind of book. This is about Alice, who is half Vila, and for this reason she gets bullied to no end, and because people think she's evil, and she ends up meeting Princess Aurora, and Princess Aurora is like, I need help to break my curse, and I don't want to just kiss somebody and have them break it, so I'm going to try and break it on my own. And so they both team up to break this curse of death that Princess Aurora has. And I'm not going to go into like the magic or the explanation of that curse, because it gets very much explained in the book. I loved this one! God, I'm not... Okay, first of all, it itched my brain for that fairy tale narrative, right? Like, it very much feels like you're reading a storybook, which is really lovely, and I feel like there wasn't limits on the writing either, because this is a new adult book. This is a very frustrating book to read because Alice is... she's not the sweetest person. She's not evil, and people just say she is, and so there's this whole book is just her being bullied. and harassed for this, and you just feel so bad for her. And the scenes were written so well that you literally want to just jump into the book and beat everyone up. And then, of course, you know, the inevitable is going to happen. She's going to become the evil sorceress in some way, shape, or form, and whatever this is going to be in this book. And you're just like, is this the breaking point? And then there was a point in the book where I was so scared to read on because there was a lot happening, and there was like still 50 pages left, and I didn't know what was going to happen. 4.5 stars. Pick this one up. And then the only physical book I read this month, King of Scars, Leigh Bardugo. I binge watched the show on premiere day, by the way. So there's that, and I needed more Grisha content, so I finally picked up the King of Scars Nikolai duology, however you want to call it. This is obviously the third series in the Grishaverse, and for that I can't explain to you the plot of this book because it's directly connected. Or, well, not directly, but it has, like, literally everything in this book is a spoiler for the original trilogy. What I can tell you, though, is it follows a lot of the side characters from the original trilogy. I'll hold this book right up way so you don't yell at me. But they're called the triumvirate, and they're the... most of them are... the triumvirate is consisted of the side characters from Shadow and Bone. There you go. Basically, all the best characters. Yeah, I had some strong feelings about that ending. That came out of nowhere. As you can see, I annotated it a lot, which I didn't expect because this is a very politically war-based fantasy. More so like politically based, especially this book. But the banter in this book, fantastic. I love the triumvirate. Like I said, they're all my favorite characters from the Shadow and Bone trilogy. So the way they interact with each other is just great. Like a lot of these purple tabs, purple is funny by the way, a lot of them are just Nikolai and Zoya content, but also a lot of the other members just have so many good one-liners. Another funny thing about this book though is, despite how long it is, it's like 528 pages, there's like 2 things that happen, but I couldn't put it down for some reason. I don't know. There's just something very addicting about the story. And it was just really fun to read about. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing me rave about everything I read this month because it was all so good. And I will see you all next time. Bye.